All right, everyone, welcome to the Yurugu discussion, chapter 8, behavior towards others, pages 411 through 27. Let's get started with our summary of what we covered, um, what we gathered from it. I'll start. Um, wow. So I think this was like the nail in the nail in the coffin to allow me to understand that wow, they really don't see us as people. Like we are just like projects, little Frankensteins for them to so-called develop and just use for their whatever they want to do with black people. They can't see us as people, as human beings. Um, they see our ancestral lands and the place we started, we were born. They see those places as places that they own forever, and they have the right to remove us from by any means necessary in order to control the land and everything under the land. And they create laws, so-called civilizations, in order to legalize murdering us, exploiting us, and enslaving us mentally and physically because we're forced to live under civilization, which is just slavery if you're a black person. Um, so it's really a lot we learn. We're gonna talk about the specific incidents, even though there's probably a million that prove this sort of behavior that comes from people who have been classified as white, who call themselves white. So we're gonna go into detail on how this behavior is conducted and what it looks like as we dive into the discussion. But anyone want to go next, or do I have to?
I'll go. Um, so I definitely agree with what you said. Um, my quick summary is the I learned more about how the Europeans don't care, nor do they see uh, black people and non-white non-black people as people at all. We're kind of like what you said, little Frankenstein, little monsters. I would say little commodities for exploitation. Um, I also learned that how Europeans use laws to continue their expansionistic behavior. So Europeans will create laws just to invade a country. Europeans will create laws just to gain access to what I call foreign lands, land that is not intentionally inhabited by European Americans, and there's the many ways that white people, Europeans use and how they use law as a weapon. Like law is not even real at this point. It's because it's not fair. It's not even which is not the best word to use. Like it's not just like law is not justice, nor does it provide justice, and law does not the way it relates to white people is not the same way as it relates to non-Europeans. For example, a black person can't shoot someone to protect themselves or themselves. A white person is can kill someone and say it was self-defense, and that's called justifiable homicide or stand your ground. And yeah, that's what I took out of it, and many examples of that. And we'll talk about that when the reading starts, of course. Is popcorn ash?
Um, yeah, I thought this part of the chapter was really informative. Um, I agree with what N was saying that the idea of I liked how she talked about legalism and how like European society uses like legality when it benefits them, but really it means nothing. And like the difference between legality and morality, because I think it's a really interesting conversation, because I think that we as people who are trying to construct a different society can't base our advocacy for people based on laws, because the laws are inherently like broke, like they're always broken by white people anyway, and they don't really have any basis. So I really like that. And I just learned a lot about like Grenada, and I did not know that South Africa was under apartheid for that long. Like I knew it was a long time, but I did not know it was like 200 plus years. Yeah, I guess I'll pass it to Kweku.
Yeah, some of the biggest things, my takeaways from this chapter were very much the how Europeans use laws basically to, mistreat non-white people, non-white populations, and really laws really don't serve any other purpose other than to mistreat non-white people. Also, the political violence, understanding what actual political violence looks like. For me, I know some of us may have been well versed in that, but actually understanding, the atrocities and, how, laws and just policies, all these written things play a part in, the mistreatment of people. And it's actually interesting that I read this at this time because I had a meeting this morning and it was dealing with compliance in hospitals. So basically, like, for lack of a better word, like how you hold these hospitals and these organizations accountable. And really, it's interesting because they have these policies and they're all written like laws, but really it's left up to the discretion of the people executing the laws. So, racist man, racist woman. So they get to choose the punishment or how to deal with these people. And it's just a great example of how, laws, only work for the European. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it to Ray.
Okay, so what I got most out of this chapter is that Europeans have caused a lot of tragedy. Although I already knew this, it's just like being able to see it within the pages and being able to read each one. Well, just the ones they highlighted here in the book, and how this is just all stemmed from like this idea of like capitalism or uncivilized people. And well, that's the way they justify their actions towards others, towards non-white people. So going ahead and just bombing everyone is the only way they feel that is the right way to solve something, especially things that are surrounding capitalism and uncivilized, quote unquote, people. And again, they use these laws and legal terms and just laws in general are these guidelines in order for people to follow them as a way to determine if they are civilized or not civilized. Like, oh, if you don't follow these rules, you're automatically like an animal, or you're automatically just not within our cultural group, although they're already not within their cultural group. And it's kind of interesting because they use these tactics, but they already don't see non-white people as humans, especially Africans. So that's what I got most out of this few pages. I'm not sure if I was the last one, but I'm gonna pass it to. Am I the last one? Sorry, Mary?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Yeah, for me, to summarize what we read, first of all, Dr. Marimba Ani is amazing. The way that she articulated this was very constructive in a way that information that I thought I already knew, I came into more understanding in detail, especially when it came to the cultural other in terms of how and why they were able to do the Holocaust. I really liked what Ashley had said about in her summary. I came to a similar conclusion as well, that they use legalization in order to justify their morality, and in shaping legal terms and creating this constant propaganda of Black people and non-white people being three to the fourth human being versus them being all right man. We it just explains a lot of why in moral terms they can still feel like they are the top of civilization while not still giving reparations to Black people. We're the only ones. They've even given it to Jewish people, but they count them as human. It's just a form of other, whereas we're so far removed that we can be ignored and they can go on scot-free and feel sanctified and still feel like they can maintain their position. And I don't know how, but we have to get out of their laws. But I'm excited to talk about it further, but that's my summary.
Thank you everyone for sharing. Does anyone have anything that they'd like to share from the beginning of the section? If not, I would like to talk about developed and underdeveloped and what that means.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about the European belief and concept and way of being. Basically, Europeans don't believe that cultural others, aka Black people, and also non-white, non-Black people, they don't believe that they have that right to even own land. So that gives us a clear reason to why every single country on the planet is inhabited by U.S. forces or European forces, British forces, Israeli forces. It tells us directly that non-white people are animals. They don't use the land for anything, so they shouldn't even have it. Let's just take it and let's do what we need to do with it. Type situation. And but that's not even the case because they were taking land from people in the Philippines, and the Philippines have their own language when it comes to how land is governed and how land is shared. They have principles of existence that says that basically we share the land for people to cultivate, so you can use this land for free. It's a friendly trade. There's not really much expectations. But when Europeans witness or observe Filipino people in the Philippines behaving this way, they see it as stupid or weak, and it's just even though it's harmonious, they see it as bad. I just wanted to talk about that because one of the first things that I had read from page 412. Oh yeah, that's it. That's it, by the way.
Yeah, it's really um tragic how there's no such thing as a country. Like those are just concepts, because if you can't protect your country, if white people can just come in there and tell you how you're gonna run your country, then that's white supremacy, white terror domination in effect, right there. And I want to talk about why this happened, how this happens, and this is because we're dealing with the Yurugu, which is the white people, the Europeans, those who can function as white people. And this is from 410 to 411. And then she says, to take land from the culture other is not to steal. As the authors of the statement quoted above indicate, another byproduct of this concept is the idea that Europeans European Americans know how to use land and resources. The culture other is not capable of doing so and has no idea of their proper uses. Europeans therefore have the right and the duty to expropriate the land and resources and make use of them. This is then the ideological source of the contemporary typology of nations as either developed or underdeveloped. The natural environment is there for something to be done with. Europeans know what to do with it and therefore have the rights to everything occupied by people who are not of European descent. For that is the same as being unoccupied, and anything unoccupied belongs to the European. So this is what the kind of mentality we are dealing with. One that truly is taking over the world, has taken over the world, dominating the world 24/7.
I have that last part highlighted, and I literally wrote non-white people have nothing. And that was what I got from that.
Yeah, I think it's pretty crazy how this has been, it kind of has gone under the radar for a lot of us, under the guise of it being legal, how so many of these things can be carried out with, really nobody saying anything because of this idea of what anything that's legal is okay to do, I guess. And how Europeans can write laws and policies into place that allow them to go into countries and steal and rape those people and really do whatever they want with them. And because it's written, it's legal, that means it's okay. I thought that was a very big theme that I came across in this book throughout this text. It says the successful capitalist can do anything to rob the poor of whatever meager resources they have, but as long as what he does is legal, as long as he fulfills his contract with wage earner or consumer, his actions are considered ethical. And it got me thinking, like, how once again, like in certain settings, like hospital settings, like how for a very long time, because it was legal, people, like a lot of these companies and organizations can get away with a lot of things, like, like birth defects. Like if a child was born with a birth defect and the doctors knew that this was entirely their fault, they were not legally obligated to, say anything about it or do anything about it. And and in some cases, when they are held legally accountable, nothing happens to them because that's how the law goes, right? Like, because what they did, if the European is in control of that law, they can manipulate it into a way that these people aren't. I don't like using the word held accountable, but I don't know a better word for it. So, for lack of a better word, like, they're not held accountable for it, and all because it's written law.
Yeah, I want to respond to that this made me think about how also these laws are used to justify, like, it's on such a micro scale as, like, like person to person violence in the US. Like, if a white person breaks the law, nothing happens to them, or if they steal. Obviously that's not true if especially like a Black person does it. But also, like, on the country level, like, these are the same, like the international court, like, war agreements that the US just arbitrarily wrote after World War II to be like, okay, we're never going to harm people again. Like, this is the only time people have ever harmed anyone else was during the Holocaust. And so to stop that from ever happening, this is like I'm forgetting the name, but y'all know what I'm talking about. And then but like, so those are written so that if any other country breaks them, then the US can go and the Geneva Conventions, thank you. That's so embarrassing, I should know that. But it was like, but if any other country appears to like break them, or they say they broke those rules, like chemical warfare or whatever, like in Syria, then the US can go in and do whatever they want. but the US breaks those constantly, like as Ezekiel was saying, and it's just like never any. I think that realizing that was like really important to help me reframe how the US is like the most dangerous country in the world, and like that having laws doesn't change that, but it reinforces that.
Yeah. Have you guys heard of the We Charge genocide? Yeah, it's like crazy that I was just reading about it because I was thinking, oh, that's like the biggest example to me of like using the law and getting nothing from it, like internationally. And then I was reading that they were trying to, they intercepted the mailing, like the US government intercepted the mailing of like the We Charge genocide papers to like Europe and stuff. And even when it did get to Europe, nothing happened from it. Like it was just like in the newspapers in Europe and then
Like, damn, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah, exactly. Just no actual plans to be implemented.
That actually, sorry.
Okay.
I mean, that sounds like another crime, you know, like intercepting mail or, you know, tampering with mail, you know, and it goes to show you nothing happened with that as well. So yeah, I remember reading, you know, the definition of genocide and thinking, wow, this is exactly what, way before I was like trying to become attempted counter-racist. And I was like, well, this is exactly what's happening to Black people today. And nothing's being done about it. You know, it's crazy. These are international laws that everybody can see and everybody can witness. And you don't have to look far to see, you know, the statistics and the evidence that shows that that's what's happening in America, but yet nothing's being done about it.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it's I forgot what I was gonna say. Oh, something that's really interesting too, I think, is that the way that we learn about it, because I feel like I'm still brainwashed in a sense. Like when I talk to my daughter, she'll be like, she does not trust like the government, and she's always just like, they could be doing this to us. And I'm like, no, they wouldn't do that. But then I'm like, wait, yeah, they would, you know, they have done those type of things. And I feel like it helps to educate, like, and really learn. Like, I feel like any person who's like in middle school higher should read this section in terms of like understanding US history, because this is like the true history. And I think it's like really, really important because it helps to frame your mindset, and that like this is not, like how Sarah was saying, like this is the most dangerous country, like to always remember that in terms of how they deal with other countries and other people.
That also reminds me of like kind of a very long time ago, you know, I was reading about what was going on in Flint and how, you know, the water became an issue, and there's that plant, I think it's a GMC plant out there, and how they, you know, use laws and policies to get clean water to that plant, but they didn't get clean water to the people. And because it's legal, it's like completely fine, you know, to do that to people, to mistreat them.
And even now, like they just recently arrested Vic Snyder, who was like the governor, I think, of Michigan at the time, and they gave him a misdemeanor. All of that, like think about, yeah, it was all just for show, and nothing comes from it, you know. Think about all the children who are permanently damaged from this. But like think about what any Black person walking down the street right now could be in prison. Think about Khalif Browder. You could be literally in prison for doing nothing for 2 to 3 years.
Just to add to that too, I'm not sure if someone can expand on this a little bit, because we're on the subject of Flint. Wasn't it that they wanted to like build on their land or like take over some part of their land or something like that? And that was like their exchange for like clean water, but they refused as a community to like stay there and not like relocate them for the Europeans to take over. Does anyone know about that?
That sounds plausible, but I'm not well researched in that area, besides knowing that they still don't have water, I believe.
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah,
research.
The only part I know is that they had like that whole area was like in this huge economic downturn because all of those places have been closed, like all the manufacturing plants, and then during that process, they had this special emergency manager who was basically like the dictator of all of like Flint. So nothing had to go through proper processing anymore. Anything could just go to this special emergency manager because Black people just need dictators, you know what I mean? And so like I think they had to change the piping, and they were like, well, instead of like actually fixing the piping, we're just gonna put like some sort of scaffold over it or something instead of actually fixing the old piping that was there. That's what I've heard.
Yep. And I think it's really important to understand and just tie all this up with text and legality. I have to read from 413, which says, the chimera of legality that inevitably accompanies the most brutal and immoral acts of European imperialistic expansion is difficult for those from different cultural traditions to understand. Again, it can be understood only as it relates to the complex, atypical character of the European system of values. Dishonesty and hypocrisy in dealing with the cultural other is the norm for European behavior. This behavior is not negatively sanctioned within the culture. Indeed, it is expressively for such interactions that the rhetorical ethic exists. This style of behavior is so strange from the point of view of other cultures that their participants find it difficult to believe that deceit and fraud are to be expected, that it represents the rule and not the exception in the European behavior towards them. This is super important to understand how these laws, when interacting with white Europeans, these people don't have your best interests at heart ever, I would suspect. And that's something to understand. And we can see this happening time and time again. We just mentioned many examples. Because white people definitely have the power to fix Flint's water, but still hasn't been fixed yet for some reason. But let it be happening in wherever white people reside, like Calabasas or any place, maybe even a place like what was it called? Just any place where a lot of Black people don't reside. I bet that problem would have been fixed a long time ago. But because it's Black people, I believe that's why it hasn't been fixed. And I think this is also very important. On 412, she says, if those who have been objects of European aggression begin to understand the cultural context of that aggression, the hostility or germinating force of the culture that explains it, they will be much more successful in counteracting it. So that's the goal here, to counteract everything we're learning about the European. We must understand them first and why they do what they do.
Speaking of understanding them, I wanted to draw attention to like page 410, where they talk about ownership. I'm just going to read a little extract from it. Among Europeans governed by the capitalistic ethic, there is nothing that approaches the sacred more than the rights of property and contract. The successful capitalist can do anything to rob the poor of whatever meager resources they have, but as long as what he does is legal, as long as he fulfills his contract with the wager earner or consumer, his actions are considered ethical. So in this, I'll read the next statement because it goes hand in hand. Similarly, European social institutions may take from Europeans their initiative and creativity, their energy and spirit, but the system will protect their right to their material possessions, for this is their property. So in reading that short statement there, that I'm really grateful for this, because one thing that I really like, an observation, we don't understand contracts. We don't understand ownership. In owning property, this information is scarce and rare, and it's only now that we are mainly, as a collective, of Black people, paying attention to money, finances, and how to get it, how to attain it, non-employee employer, like 9-to-5 ways, which we're actually learning now. And in this case, you can see like there's like a rush and hurry, like the world's in lockdown. The more knowledge there is, like the whole world is it's like they're afraid of progress, so much so that they scare us with fear. And yeah, sorry, the point I wanted to make about this is that, just making observations, hip hop management, white Jewish people, all forms of management that can be our form of cultural capital, our way to gain money, economic growth as a collective through our culture, is inhibited by Europeans and has been set up. And this is something we have to reclaim as soon as, like, in all industries, just in fashion, with our prints being made production wise being done in Holland, mainly making the main source of income, European again, benefiting from our cultural heritage, our food, getting more restaurants out there. The list goes on. There's numerous amounts, but just that short statement alone allowed me to really understand how we have not been able to get a hold of our cultural capital, and we need to do that as soon as possible.
Yes, I believe. I also believe that's a huge part and issue with these laws, and really the mistreatment and attack on Black people and non-white people around the world. I come to understand, when you own land, that's wealth, and when you're systematically denied land, you don't have the ability to create wealth. So I don't think it's any surprise that we're seeing laws through deceit, dishonesty, etc. What the many tactics and confusion that racist man, racist woman use to systematically deny us land, so we therefore cannot, build wealth.
Yeah, and I just want to throw in some more examples of how the European laws, white laws, have been used against us. It was once illegal for Black people to own dogs because white people have used dogs as weapons. It's once illegal for Black people to own land. Once illegal for Black people to read. Once illegal for Black people to congregate with more than a couple of Black people. But once illegal for Black people to get married. Once illegal for Black people to do a lot of stuff. So just an example of how these white laws historically have not been used for our advantage, for our gains, for our well-being, and also how these laws are worshipped and white people die protecting these laws or whatnot. So either like what Mary had said, have to get out of the laws, or what Neely Fuller suggests, learn how to use their laws against them, like the 5th and 14th Amendment. But that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, even if you use, like, even buying property is not the same if you're like white versus Black, in that, like, for a lot of Black people it just becomes a debt trap, and then with eminent domain, like, the government just takes your house or your property. And so it's like I think it's very like iffy to like assume like having land is gonna produce wealth for a community, because it's very, yeah, like they'll use any sort of natural disaster, any excuse to find, if they see a large group of Black people owning land in a certain area, they're gonna find a way to like get rid of those people. So I think it's just something to think about too. Like, I think that we should just, I don't think that there's a way to use the laws to benefit Black people personally.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of give context to what laws have the power to do to countries. So there's a really good example of what happened to the Congo in regards to how Europeans were able to just declare law and declare something belonging to them, and the repercussions of that. And so we're all clear that non-white people, especially Black people, don't have access to European law in the context that it protects them, only to be exploited. So on page 413, it reads, I'm gonna have to read a paragraph and a half just for context sakes. The chimera of legality.
I read that.
Read that already?
Yeah.
All right, so I'll read this then. As a prelude to his sadistically brutal behavior towards Africans in Central Africa, Leopold of Belgium formed the International African Association, avowedly to be concerned with the well-being of indigenous African population. In a conference held in West Africa in 1884, the European powers gave to this organization lands in Central Africa. Chapman Cohen says, the conference gave what didn't belong to it to an association that had no claim to what it received. In August 1885, Leopold notified the signatories that his association would henceforth be known as the Congo Free State and that he himself was monarch of the domain. Having thus legally and in a civilized manner usurped land that did not belong to him, he then proceeded to brutalize its inhabitants. This behavior fits the pattern of European behavior towards the cultural other. When I read this, I was I'm not surprised by anything anymore. I was happy to have the knowledge, disappointed that this is the reality. But there's no but. That's a prime example of how laws have been used. White people to come into power, to stay into power, and to take things that logically does not belong to them, rationalistically doesn't belong to them. And keep in mind, like, this King Leopold was responsible for like the death of roughly 15 million Africans in the Congo, I believe. Also, he was known for removing the hands of the slaves that worked for his rubber company. So if they weren't meeting their quotas, they would have their arms removed and their hands removed. He reduced tribal populations that were once 40,000 to 4,000, and populations that were 10,000 to 100. So he definitely depopularized Africa. And his organization was supposed to be for the people of Africa. It was supposed to be for the promotion of progress within Africa, but that just means genocide at this point.
Yep. He even called it the Congo Free State, and then commenced decimating its people and its environment. And to this day, the people in the Congo are still being brutalized and being mistreated because the laws, so-called United Nations, the so-called Geneva Convention, the so-called humanitarian laws just are not designed to protect Black people. This is why Black people dying in mines throughout the globe. And I think it's really important to understand, he said he was going to civilize that place. It was like his destiny to civilize that area of the world known as the Congo. And on 416, she says, to be civilized is to be able to hide one's true motives, and civilization is the appearance of a moral order that does not exist. If these things are understood, then it is more easily realized that to be a cultural other implies that there are no laws that govern or inhibit the Europeans' behavior towards you. All right, so living in a civilization in itself puts you in danger. You're in danger just by living in a civilization controlled by white people. And this is either true or false. I believe it's correct, though.
It's the concrete jungle.
So is that why they call us civilians?
There are two types of civilians. There's a Black civilian, which is not a true civilian. There's a true civilian, which is a white person, I believe. A person who can function as white.
So then someone who So then someone who will follow the rules, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found this part to be very interesting about King Leopold. I felt that this was the second incident I've seen, I don't know, colonial ruler, European, create something on the benefit of black people. And I know that this, I wrote, undoubtedly caused confusion amongst people, because I'm sure at the time they thought this man was, doing something of benefit to them. But it goes to show you how, he created this entity out of thin air, probably wrote some laws down that were, that served no other purpose than other than mistreating the people there in that country.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're reading like Destruction of Black Civilization as well. And he uses the exact same tactics. Like he takes advantage of like tribal or cultural beefs between the people in what is called the Congo. And he ends up getting a whole like paramilitary force of one tribe to do a lot of the mutilating of people in another tribe. The like ways in which white people manipulate us into like hurting each other is just, I think that's like the big, like when we talk about legality, it's really interesting because now that the US is constantly fighting proxy wars, they can be on one side of the war, like in Nicaragua, right? They can be on the side of the Contras. And then like later on be like, oh, the Contras committed like war crimes, and like they don't have any blood on their hands, and they can like even try and prosecute people who are part of the Contras, knowing that the CIA trained them. You know what I mean? It's like now it's always the refinement of white supremacy. Like they figured out another way to do it. And I think it's interesting because I don't know if you guys know about like Norway, but Norway has like one of the largest like oil reserves. Like most of their economy is just based on producing oil, to the point, and they like distribute it to the point where like, I don't know, like they say like every Norwegian is a millionaire or something because they distribute whatever resources to like the whole population. But like you will never see America bombing or attacking Norway for their resources, right? Because that is another white country. And I think it's very important that we sometimes people think that there's only an economic motivation, but a lot of times the exploitation is because these people are considered the other.
Thank you for that, Ash. I didn't know that personally, but for me, that is definitely, another reinforcement, and, or another reinforcement to people, that should be another reinforcement to people that racism and white supremacy, at its finest. Because, I've always told people that, look at the state of the world. 10% of the population are ruling the world. The rest of the population's in chaos. They are scrapping by. And now, which off of what you just told me, it seems like, all these non-white people in their countries are being bombed for their resources. A white country who also has the same resources receives, no kind of threat or to their resources or anything of the kind. So that for me, that's 101, racism, white supremacy. Mm-hmm. Another theme in the book, which is just the other section, political violence, which for me was sorry, I got distracted. Which for me was another big theme in this section, and how really the use of politics is the best way to deceive the population into falling for the laws, and encouraging the lawmaking, backing those laws through politics. Such things as communist countries, using the term like, oh, they don't believe in democracy. We need to intervene Therefore, now laws are being made. You're getting public opinion to sway. You're getting public favor to go into these countries and wreak havoc and terror.
Yeah, I think the whole thing with like the communist countries is very interesting too, because it's like the reason that they always try to juxtapose communism to democracy. Communism is an economic system. Democracy is a political system. They shouldn't even be compared because they're two different things. But it's because they don't want to say capitalism, right? Because they don't want to say it's a war between communism and capitalism, because then it implicates their government, that their government is meant to control a certain type of economic order. And they don't want to say that, right? So it's always, we're fighting for democracy. But like, what does that even mean? It's very interesting.
Wow, another amazing point. I didn't even make the correlation or the connection, but that definitely makes a lot of sense. That, you know, once again, the deceit and really fooling people into thinking, communism is the direct opposite of democracy. So therefore, if people aren't experiencing democracy, some would say that they are experiencing oppression under communism. Therefore, now we are obligated to go into those countries and establish, or how she said in this, stabilize these countries, right? In Grenada, they were saying they need to go in and stabilize the country. Yeah.
Does anyone? I was gonna on 417, when she talks about the Paul, what his name is actually Paul Tibbets. I looked it up. The guy who dropped the atomic bomb in Hiroshima. And I just thought it was like another example of the insane just contradictions. You know, you're having these like Nuremberg trials and all of these trials to prosecute these Nazi officers who have committed these heinous crimes. And yet you're awarding this man who literally dropped a bomb and killed tens of thousands of people. It's just and has forever like probably, ruined the capacity for life to even grow in those areas. It's just an insane contradiction. And I like the way she talks about Japan and Japan's role in World War II and the type of violence that was forced onto Japan versus other places. I thought it was really interesting, especially when you think about the context of Japan is like thinks that they're white in terms of the way that they treat other non-white countries. And I think it was almost like a reckoning for them that I don't really think that they learned from.
Yeah, and I forgot the guy who dropped the bomb, like when I was reading it, like I was like, this person, it sounded like he was gonna like he was nervous that the that what he was doing was incorrect, but he was just worried about if the bomb was gonna work. So like, even if you think like these people, white people, have like some kind of compassion or like the will to not destroy people who are not white, they just will, I don't know, they just have no problem dropping a nuclear bomb on two countries, killing babies, children, women, men, all of destroying life forever, destroying the ability for that land to possibly farm for generations, and this is what they do. They just destroy life, and it's just business as usual. But when they deal with their own, they have to have trials. Oh, you kill white people? Now we have to take you to trial, Yo, yeah, we got oil here. Yeah, it's everyone's oil. You got white oil for you, oil for everybody. But if you black, you like, over in them deserts, and you talking about that's your oil, we got some news for you. They're coming over tanks, coming over with some laws for you, and those laws equal being mistreated, Black people having to get running out of their towns in confusion and chaos, being displaced by the thousands, being maimed and destroyed by the thousands. And this is because this is what happens when we live in a so-called civilization under the white nation, the only race on planet Earth, the white race.
And to add context to how much that guy didn't care, he named that bomb after his mom, like the bomb that dropped on Hiroshima.
It's disgusting.
Yeah, it's very disgusting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to just I wanted to read
very good
something from page 415. It's the fact that Marimba was able to predict exactly what the American government did to Gaddafi. Like, does anybody know when this book was published?
I believe it was around 94. But let me check again.
94, and I'm sure Gaddafi was killed in the 2000s, assassinated through the same method I'm about to read now. To Reagan, Gaddafi is a mad dog who supports attacks of terrorism against the free world, European, Euro-American interests. Therefore, Reagan could intentionally provoke Libya into defensive attack by invading the Gulf of Sidra, 12 miles within Libya's coastline. Then, in relation, he could indiscriminately bomb the Libyan city of Tripoli, perhaps in the effort to assassinate Gaddafi. We all are aware, like in Gaddafi's assassination, which Hillary Clinton had specified in her emails that she thought would bring about a form of disorder to the land, which will be good for them. And we saw what that resulted in. It resulted in lawlessness and the government collapsing in a way that free radical Arabians and the Arab Springs just ran rampage on the land, on the native indigenous people of those regions of Libya, and the migrating Africans also coming through. And it's disgusting and disgraceful, but the fact that I don't want to say that the fact that modern day slavery in its form of barbarianism was able to be conducted in the 2000s, let alone all throughout our time. It's for me, sorry, the point that I'm trying to make here is that this is information. If Gaddafi had read this information, he would have, like, I don't know, wisened up in a sense, but we have what Marimba here is doing, and is vital information. If this had been taken more seriously, we would have more organization in Africa. Gaddafi was trying to bring about, I'm not saying that he didn't have these atrocities, but on the long-term scale, and it's not even a but, on a long-term scale, he was aiming towards unifying and getting one currency for Africa to have, like the euro, and it will be backed by natural resources. So you already know all of our debts are cleared in that sense, and they couldn't have that, and that is the ultimate reason why he had to be assassinated. And the fact that Marimba Ani is talking about this in 94 and we don't pay this enough attention, this is not our first point of call. We've been like, we have truly been sleeping, and it's shameful. And yeah, what's anyone else's thoughts on this particular, the fact that she predicted, or just clearly through her research was able to see his death, assassination?
Yeah, yeah. When I was reading that, I kind of felt like a Dr. Francis Cress Welsing moment, because the level of observation of being able to see how the system of racism, white supremacy is able to, like, organize a coup, organize a massacre, a genocide, internal tribal genocide, or a tribal versus tribal genocide, or how it creates military forces, or funds military forces for its own agenda, and how it assassinates those who threaten its imperialistic rule over the region. And I think that when she goes through over her whole list of, like, the many examples of this, is something that everyone should be aware of, like the many times these presidents of these nations have orchestrated the deaths of millions of innocent people, and it's called what is it called? Low intensity warfare, where you are killing and causing civilians to suffer. Low intensity warfare.
One of the point.
Oh, go ahead, Ruth.
Just one of the points I wanted to make out, or just to state really quickly, is just like how before reading this part of the bombing of Japan, it's just like how we read about it in like history class or in like lower education, and how they kind of just like went over this whole section, how we learned about this in depth and been tested on these on this one particularly. And they always say something like, oh, well, they had it coming for them, you know, it's like their fault, like we're in war, we had to be like bigger and badder. So it's very interesting how you guys are making like tying the text all together and really showcasing the individual who decided to do this act. Although it was a group effort, it was definitely a person that released it and found joy, killing almost over 70,000 people. Just crazy.
Yeah. I wanted to add that, you know, with the Gaddafi thing, I think evidence shows that, this can almost be predicted because it's been done so many times, for people, it's been done so many times, the non-white people and African and Black people all over the planet. I also wanted to add about the Japan bombing that I also find it very interesting how you can, call somebody a hero after, they bomb and kill so many people. I don't know I haven't looked up the definition of war crimes, but to me, I understand that, to be killing people, innocent people who really don't have any means of defending themselves, which, America, which, the Europeans, white supremacists do all the time, violating these laws, and they're never held accountable, for lack of a better word. And the international entity that, for some reason, I guess I was misinformed, the UN doesn't, actually do anything to these people when they commit these atrocities. So another way how laws are manipulated and only work for the European, they don't work for non-white people, and how you can use politics to, create an image of a hero after, killing so many innocent people.
Yeah, to add to the Gaddafi thing, I think something that's so interesting was like, it was around 2011, the whole Arab Spring, in the way that it was like, I don't know, the way that it was shown in the media as this like huge, wave of like liberation to these like to North Africa and stuff like that. And to see where all those countries are now, to see like Libya is like, like having slave trade with like Black people, like Syria has had like what, hundreds of thousands of people who have been killed, hundreds of thousands of people who have migrated, like, and just to see like the insane amount of like destabilization. I think it's always, we should be like very, and it from like the lesson I learned from it is to be super weary of any type of, protest that the American government is like propping up, like i.e. like Hong Kong, like the Hong Kong protesters. I'm very like suspicious of their motivations, because if you're backed by the US and the US is like portraying you as like this amazing protest, it's just very suspicious to me personally. Like at the same time, there are protests happening in like Chile, Iraq, Iran, and those things are not getting any, media, right? And it's because those protests are talking about the role of the US in those countries.
they have us convinced that Venezuela, who possesses the largest oil reserve in the world, they have us convinced, the majority of the US population, including this administration and the Obama administration, convinced that the duly elected president of that country, Maduro, who was kind of like an offspring or like a protege of the previous Chavez, that's a Black country, you know, and those presidents consider themselves Afro-Latino, both of them, and especially Chavez. He publicly claimed his Afro heritage. And we are so asleep that we don't even realize that those are our people, that is our land. If we all spoke Spanish and connected and identified with our South American brothers and sisters and identified as one of them, which we are, the only thing that separates us is that we don't speak Spanish. And if we came out 100,000 strong, that's an act of war. When you put sanctions on a country like that, and those people have all of their operations are completely stopped. All of their oil production is completely stopped, and we're so just. That we don't, Trinidad is Venezuela, right? All your Trinidadian folks, that's Venezuela. That's right across the bridge. All the same, those are our people. That's our fucking oil. Sorry, excuse the insanity of the language. Sorry, but I'm pissed off this week. You know, I'm you know, I just
concise. Keep it concise.
Okay, bye. That's it.
Anyone have any comments? I do suspect a lot of Afro-Latino people, if they are of the lighter complexion, then I would be as suspicious as them as I would be the mulattoes that is being mentioned in the destruction of Black civilization, in terms of who is Black and who has historically helped Black people, who has historically allowed or plotted against Black people. And I do believe a lot of Latino, so-called Hispanics, have participated in that. And an example, or I think the example is I want to get to the example of a actual Black concept of a country called South Africa. Actually, this is a white country, but it's called South Africa. And on 4/19, she says, during the 1982 to 83 school year, the government spent 1,323 for the education of each European student for the year. For Africans, the figure was 178 per student. In 1982, only 2% of African students went past high school. The figure for Europeans was 15%. The teacher-student ratio is, for one European teacher, there's 18. For one European teacher, there's 18 students. For one African teacher, there's 40 students. In the area of health, there was one doctor for every 330 Europeans, one doctor for every 19,000 Africans. There was child mortality rate of 14% and a life expectancy of 67 for the Europeans, with a child mortality rate of 60% and a life expectancy of 55 for Africans. In 1983, it was estimated that 2.9 million Black children suffered from malnutrition. This is a civilization that they call South Africa, civilized land, where all this mistreatment, death, and destruction is happening. So I just think it's really important to understand like how they use these words to call something what it's entirely not, unless we believe these things to be civilized. I don't think I live in a civilized place. If I was white, then I would say yeah, this is fine. I don't, but I'm a victim of the system. So
Yeah, I liked at the end how she said Africans must do that themselves when she's talking about charging him for war crimes. Uh, uh, the guy you were talking about in South Africa, and I found that to be interesting. Because obviously under the system of racism and white supremacy, Black people have no power, right? So they have absolutely no power to seek. They don't have the means to charge this man with war crimes, right? They have to go to Europe, where this man is from, and ask that those white supremacists charge him for war crimes. It reminds me of the speech that Kwame Nkrumah gave when Patrice Lumumba was murdered, and the prime minister, the first prime minister or president of the Congo at the time, and how he went to the UN and he was speaking about how he was murdered. And he went there several times to ask, that they send aid to the Congo, that they send help to him, because, the situation is getting worse and worse. And, of course, they never sent the aid, they never helped, and he was eventually assassinated. He went, and, he went there prior to request that they help and they send help for him, but obviously the request was never granted, and Patrice Lumumba was eventually assassinated. So it shows that's a prime example of the Africans, non-white people, Black people all over the planet have absolutely no power to charge these people with war crimes.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is like, I feel like people from these countries always try to set up their own independent all African commissions so that they could do that, but then they always get murdered. So it's like, I don't know what the solution even is, because it's like they try to independently charge Europe and other countries like that, but if they can just kill people, then what happens to your mission or your work? I don't know. I guess that's why you're not supposed to have leaders.
Yeah, that's another great point. Which ultimately led to Kwame Nkrumah's downfall was he was trying to unite Africa as one basic country, one continent, and it's something that I'm seeing happening today, which is I encourage everybody to keep an eye on, because I don't know what's going to happen. I know the white supremacists is going to do something, but at the beginning of the year, Africa established that the trade agreement, which basically established free trade between all the countries in Africa, essentially making them the world's largest market. And they're even talking about granting them passports, having one single passport. So they're essentially becoming their own, continent, their own country, and so I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the white supremacist reacts to that. We see a lot of China coming in to that country currently, and I don't know if that's what we should be looking out for. I think it is, but I don't know if that's the only thing. I don't know how. Basically, I'm saying I don't know how Europeans are going to move after that. I tell you all that to say, we have seen Africans and Black people in the past try to establish these leaders in these organizations, these single organizations, and it hasn't worked. So I am pretty confused as to why now this is being allowed.
I'm very suspicious of that. Yeah, I'm very suspicious. It's just refinement of the system, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, I believe they could have if they I don't know, maybe they'll feel better going to war with the entire continent than not going to war with Because right now they just, mistreat individual nations on the continent. If it's all united, they could just target the entire continent as an enemy and then go in.
Yeah, but if they're all united, they could like have sanctions against the US where they don't trade their natural resources and minerals. And then like what would all of these huge companies, Apple, etc., do, right? Like the whole of the US economy would basically, like already the US is in decline, it would be like an insane decline. So there is like strength in that. I think most warfare nowadays is going to be economic and so.
That would definitely be lovely to see if that would happen, but under the system of race and white supremacy, they're gonna be like, ooh, money, and they want to sell all their natural resources and goods for $2. But I think that's why it's important for I always say us to go back and like help like build up the economy as well, so we don't have people out there just trading natural goods for $2.
Yeah, I have no clue, but I am aware of this fact, this reality. The European, this is from 417, the European is capable of decimating whole populations of cultural others. Actions taken on behalf of the European imperialistic enterprise attest to that fact. According to the logic of European ideology, cultural others can be destroyed with impunity without inhibitive emotional reaction among those who kill or from within the culture as a whole. So I read this part to say that I think if the continent were to attempt to take control of their resources, the repercussions will be deadly. I don't know if they would be able to strategically take control of their resources without understanding how the system functions and how they're viewed by white people.
Well, I mean, I feel like Vietnam was able to withstand like at least for like what 35 years that because they understood like that they were willing to take a lot of damage for a greater cause in preserving their nation. So I think it's possible. I mean, the white countries have lost wars, and there are certain places that they don't have access to the resources. I mean, Vietnam is not like that great. I mean, I think Vietnam is still doing very good as a country now, but obviously that's a different conversation, but it can be done.
Yeah, it can be done, but I don't think it can be done without understanding the system. And I don't think Vietnam is a black continent either. So
Yeah, it's all very. Oh, were you gonna say something, Mary?
Yeah, I was just going to say that it will also take African leaders to be on code and stick to one code, but which would first mean like getting rid of the corrupt African leaders who are complacent in place that white supremacy has allowed to just keep the economy floating or just exploitative. So yeah, that would be the first line in our organizing against Europeans outside sources from African.
Yeah, I would agree, Mary. That's a good point. From what I see, a lot of African nations, their leaders, they have an understanding that they understand, like how Dr. Marimba Ani said in a previous chapter, that what Africans need is for their resources to be left alone. So I think they all understand now that they need control of their resources in order to, become economically independent. But I also would have to agree with Swal when he says they do need to understand the system. I don't know if they truly understand racism and white supremacy and how it works, but I think that they're making great strides in, creating an economically independent Africa. And, this is where, the counter racist, this is where we need to start maybe linking up with some of these people and letting them know, like, hey, you can't be trusting these people, can't be trusting, can't, just because he's not white, you know, he's, doesn't mean you can trust him. Remember, Black people have no friends.
I totally agree with you. We definitely have to do what we can, but I feel like, especially with African leaders, well, the ones that have known about white supremacy, they're past. The ones who are try to practice a form of code, they have been assassinated, taken out, and the ones that probably do know are being complacent for the sake of their own survival, existence, and not. It's, if anything, it's more so, I think, for African leaders, not the teaching of white supremacy, but the teaching about self-respect and how to attain power ourselves. And maybe they know how to maintain power or be complacent in society, but I guess how to counter white supremacy racism is what they need to understand in order for us to gain any kind of cultural capital or economic growth to the point that we are successfully standing off against political forces and self-interest. And also in doing that, like another fear, Tulsa. And so if anything, warfare defenses on that scale, like for anything that can, like, I don't know, take out nuclear bombs within radius, that's I think our best bet against a tantrum of a white supremacy leader.
Yeah, I feel like, honestly, like if we're really gonna end white supremacy, like millions of people are gonna die ultimately, but like ultimately they can't bomb places where there's resources that they need. And I think that's literally the only leverage that like non-white people have. Like at the end of the day, you can't completely decimate the whole country because there's places that you need that land for something. And I think that's like the only leveraging power that non-white people have, personally.
Did you hear about the Black City that they're building in Georgia? These Black designers.
Yeah, but they already went back on their word and said it's not only for Black people.
Because somehow it's legally you can't just come out and say it's strictly for Black people, but it can still be. It's a start.
You said there's artists that did what?
There's designers and architects and a whole group of builders, planners that are designing a city in Georgia for Black people.
Oh, I haven't heard about that.
Governed by Black people. And then the Nation of Islam has a lot of land there that they're farming.
I have heard about the land that the Nation of Islam owns for farms. That doesn't even seem like it'd be possible though to, you know, say that this is, I mean, maybe they could, you know, because they have HBCUs, but it doesn't seem like something that he can do, you know, say that this city's only for Black people.
Well, not legally.
Yeah.
I want to read
people. But sorry, I just want to say one thing. And people are upset, and I think people being upset is a prime example of anti-Blackness. Whenever Black people say anything, they're gonna do anything that symbolizes either practically or symbolically some type of independent respect or self-group respect. Is always going to be attacked. I had heard about it, but I had heard about it in the same time I heard about it, them saying they're not going to actually do it that way. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I want to comment on from 424. Just so we're all clear on the mentality we are dealing with, and like the kind of government we're dealing with, why we have all these assassination, why we can have places like Yemen and Syria and areas all over the world, Central Africa, experiencing massive famine, massive death, massive inflation. The inflation is because white people control the money and how much money is worth. The massive poverty is because white people control who has access to food, who can grow food, who can sell food. And just to comment on what happened to the people in Nicaragua, who I believe there's definitely a massive amounts of highly melanated Black people in Nicaragua. So I'm not surprised that this happened there. But from 424 it reads, the situation of U.S. involvement in Nicaragua demonstrates the cold remoteness with which European Caucasians can plan and execute not only the destruction of non-European people, but somehow what seems worse, how they can slowly torture people mentally and physically over a long period of time, all while attempting to control all while attempting to convince themselves that they do this in order to free those under torture. Any amount of violence can be tolerated towards the cultural order without conflict. A pattern emerges. The rhetoric of the European ideology is always to say the opposite of the truth. We enslave you to free you. Is there any wonder that the Nicaraguan national anthem includes the phrase, Yankees, the enemies of mankind? And to translate, whites, the enemy of mankind. And mankind also means white people as well. So they're also an enemy of themselves and their entire globe. And they've also created mulatto races to help them in their conquest and domination.
Um, Anyone else have anyone to read?
I'm not for closing comments.
Yeah, I've gone through all my notes.
Likewise.
Our closing comments is I can't wait to read further of how the Europeans, the white people, the white supremacists, the anti-black people. I'm really interested into looking at learning more about how their silly manifest and to really understand like their wipe them out mentality, their seek and destroy mentality is all very tragic, but still very interesting to be learning this material, and very happy to have be reading this text and just learning wow so much about the truth and like what's really going on planet Earth. Um, I'll send it to Mr. N.
Yeah, I'm happy to go next for closing. Sorry, go ahead, Lo.
Closing comments. I'm gonna keep it concise. Black people have no friends, and there are infinite ways that the system of racist white supremacy will continue its manifest destiny of expanding throughout the entire universe. And it's up to us to really work towards solving the problem of racism, white supremacy. And I look forward to reading the next few pages of this book to learn more about the enemy, the people we have to study. And I'll pass it to Miss.
Miles, thank you. Um, I really enjoyed reading this section of Yurugu. It was highly informative. I wish I had this information when I was writing my dissertation on the concept of human and how Europeans basically make sure to dehumanize others, the cultural other, so that they can morally like bank on their behavior and basically legalize slavery. And the way that Marimba Ani has broke this down and put even down to the profound prediction of Gaddafi's death, just really let me know how accurate this information is, how vital this information that we're reading is, and how happy I am to be able to just be able to take in so many different opinions and perspectives on what we are gaining from this information. I feel more and more armed in this uncivilized, masked, civilized world that we're living in, and try and understand law, contracts, and policies so that we can establish ourselves a little bit further and use this knowledge and actually apply the knowledge that we have now to solidify a future for the next thousands of years for ourselves, as long with our cultural capital and bank money from our culture through ownership and contracts, and then how to trademark and copyright. This is something that we need to get on board with as soon as possible.
I'd like to go next. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your closing comments. My closing comments are, I'm really grateful that I'm able to understand, the use of laws now and better understanding of how politics and laws play, complementary of each other. From now on, I can't, as I am listening to laws being said, I'm not thinking how can they protect me, but rather how are they using this law to mistreat others. So thank you once again. That's my closing comment. Looking forward to everything else in this chapter and for the rest of the book. Honestly, we're almost there.
And the only thing for me to close off is really after these few pages, like I've always been interested, but just after these few pages, it's just really relearning some of this like history that has been taught from the European lens and seeing it from an African-centered lens, because it's very interesting, like the differences. And as we've been learning, just European behavior and Asili and all of these things are playing a part into how they provide quote unquote information to us. Although it's not knowledge, but I'm excited to gain knowledge through this text and then the rest of the book and apply it to things that I thought I knew. And yeah.
For me, I really enjoyed this section. I think it was like different because so much of this text is like very philosophical. So it was interesting to like read something that was more like historical. It was like a nice change of pace. I really liked learn. I mean, I didn't like, but it was very informative to learn about a lot of these atrocities that have happened around the world. For me, it's interesting because it makes me think about like just the fact that all of these countries make up the majority of the world, and people consider Black people to be also like a colonized group in America. It just makes me think about the small amount of people who are benefiting from like this immense amount of destruction of these communities and these people, and how can we build connections, like what is Kwaku was saying, and also about legality too. I think it's really important that we like stop making such a big deal about certain laws. Like people have been fighting for these eviction moratoriums. People are still being evicted. And it doesn't matter what type of laws are there if there's no one to enforce them. And obviously the police are not going to. So Yeah, that's all I have to say.